Welcome to Leadership, the Secret Sauce, the podcast where we talk to extraordinary coaches and leaders to dive into the realms of leadership and coaching. We're your hosts, Dave Lipsky and Matt Dodson. So let's jump in with another guest and find out their answer to the question, what is your secret sauce? All right, before we begin, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Character Matters Coaching and Consulting, where they believe that your character is the compass guiding you through life's journey. Whether you're facing personal or professional challenges, they are dedicated to helping you discover and strengthen the core values that define who you are. Dave, what do we have on the podcast today?
I would like to welcome Jeff Wolf in. I have been working with Jeff for a number of years, and I'm finally excited that we get a chance to ask him some questions about his secret sauce. But before we start, Jeff, I wanted to start off with just a check-in. Where are you calling in from? What's the weather outside? And then what's your weather inside?
Well, I'm calling in from San Diego, and the weather outside, as I look out, it's beautiful palm trees, and it's about 65 degrees. So it's a beautiful day, sunny day in San Diego. And the weather inside is very nice and feeling really good about being a guest on your podcast.
This is awesome. Matt and I created this podcast because we wanted to talk to coaches and learn a little more about them. And I also want to do the energy check-in myself because I knew Jeff's answer around San Diego. And this is the only day, very few times a year, I could say it's 70 degrees out, low humidity, and absolutely gorgeous outside here. Matt, how about you?
Well, it's in the mid 80s now out here in Texas. So it's starting to warm up. I will say that. So at beginning of May really starts to turn up the heat. I think I'll mention just internally, today would have been my, mom's birthday. I know we had another podcast this morning, but so I would say internally, I'm feeling pretty reflective about that, and just in thinking about her and what she would have thought of the podcast had she been around, and maybe my love for radio and television. So, yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that, Matt, and
honoring
your mom.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, Jeff, one of the questions that we like to ask is, say you're on a plane and you're coming back from an executive engagement somewhere in the U.S. and you're sitting next to somebody on the plane and they say to you, Jeff, what do you do? How do you describe it?
Well, that happens all the time when I'm traveling. And very simple, I say that I help leaders go from good to great or great to greater. And I stop right there and how do you do that? And then we get into a conversation. But that's what I tell people when they ask me, what do I do?
That's wonderful. That's a very succinct way of doing it, and without trying to explain what coaching is and the typical sports analogies or anything like that. Yeah.
I like it. And then building on that, then the person next to you says, what does that look like? What would your next response be?
Well, then I work with, I coach leaders in both leadership development and executive coaching to really refine their skills and help them get to a place that maybe they want to get to, but they can't get to. And really work with them on those skill sets that will take their, let's say, leadership to the next level. And, it could be through executive presence. It could be strategic. It could be all kinds of different things. But it depends on the individual of who we're working with and what those needs are to help them get to where they need to be a more effective leader.
Jeff, if you had to describe your secret sauce, how would you describe it?
Well, as you could tell from my answer of, what do you say to people before, I keep things very simple. And I think simplicity and clarity is really important in what we do as coaches, because we can get caught up in all the nuances and everything, but it's really simple. So I guess my secret sauce comes down to being a really good listener, of listening to what people are saying. More importantly, though, listening to what they're not saying and reading between the lines, keeping things simple, and really getting people and nudging them, pushing them to where they think they never thought they could be, but I can see the potential of where they could be to get them there.
Mm.
So I think that's my secret sauce.
Mm.
And again, simplicity. I look at coaching ever since I started doing this as just being simple. Clarity. Clarity is the most important thing. And the easier you can make it, the better it's going to be and the more success you're going to have. And for the last 25 years, it's worked for me.
Mm. How did
I'm
you?
always
Yeah,
good.
go ahead, Dave.
Oh, I was thinking like the how you see what you look for what people are not saying, and I've always admired your ability to cut through things with senior executives. And what do you look for? How would I experience you bringing up the things that I'm not saying to help me move forward?
Well, there's a couple ways. The way we communicate, I mean, I'm sure you're sure the Moravian method, 55% of how we communicate is through body language, 38% is the spoken word, or 38% is tone of voice, and 7% is the spoken word. So I kind of use that. I watched people's body language. I listened to their tone of voice, and I could tell, you sound as though you're not really sure about that or what direction you're going in, and getting them to talk about those things that maybe they're not saying and bring it into the open. And that way we can address them. It's like addressing the elephant in the room, so to speak.
Jeff, when did you kind of know, like when was, like when did you know, like, hey, this is my secret sauce, simplicity, reading between the lines. Like how did you get there?
It goes back to my days when I was in my mid 20s. I was a head basketball coach at a high school. And in those days, we were implementing some new things. I wanted to try new things, different things, be innovative, be creative in the coaching process. And in order for me to do that, I realized that, yes, this is a complex system that we're trying to install, but I have to dumb it down. I have to make it easy for these kids to understand. So I broke it down into simple language. I broke it down into simple exercises. I broke it down into making them understand the why we do things, the how we do things, the what we do things. And that's when I realized that simplicity is really the way to go. And then when I left coaching after 6 years and I went into business, and as I rose in the ranks in business, I kept that same philosophy of simplicity. And what it really boils down to, as you guys know in business, it's all about people. It's about how do we really work with people to get them to where they need to be? How do we get a culture of excitement? How do we get people motivated? And it's simple if you break it down, into its finite parts. And we try to complicate things so much. And I think the more we complicate it, the harder it is for people. So I just took it from when I was coaching into business. When I left the corporate world and started this work 25 years ago, I took that same philosophy into my coaching practice. And as I said, it's worked so far.
Mm.
And, I have no complaints.
Yeah. Jeff, who would you say, like, just from like either an athletic coaching perspective or just even from a business coaching that you read 25 years ago that really influenced how you do this? I mean, is it Wooden? I mean, is it people like
I
that?
was
Or?
I was very lucky when I was coaching that there was not a gap between a high school coach and a college coach
Mm.
because they depended on one another. As a high school coach, you wanted to send your players to school to graduate, to get a good education and to play basketball. And on the other side, the college coaches were out there recruiting. And I was lucky that we had a really good program. And I became friendly with John Wooden. I became friendly with Al McGuire. I became friendly with Bobby Knight and read a lot of the books, particularly John Wooden. who you could take almost everything he said and put it into a business perspective. And one of my great quotes that I love from John Wooden that I tell my executives all the time is, "Be quick, but don't hurry."
Mm.
And I love that quote. And, sometimes we just have to take a step back and not rush to things. And so sports have been a great, the metaphors in sports really apply to business. And I've taken them, into doing it right now.
Yeah. I think
I like that. Yeah, be quick, but don't worry. All right, so
Don't
I have
hurry.
to don't
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 hurry.
hurry.
don't
Don't
hurry.
hurry.
So I have to share one quote that Jeff gave me maybe a year or two ago. But the three B's, and I still use it. Could you share it? I don't want to share it, Jeff. It sounds better when it comes from you.
I like to tell people, be brilliant, be brief, and be gone. The three
Mm,
B's. Again, goes
nice.
back to simplicity.
When like when I think about Wooden on leadership, reading some of his books, he's very eloquent in describing sort of his process, like all the way down to kind of basic fundamentals. So how do you get to below the surface of these executives, um, and not sort of just stay on the surface of skills and behaviors? How do you get there?
You get there by asking those questions that go deep into, their psyche, and get them to share with you um, what those things are. I'll go back to my sports analogy. It's taking things all the way down to, how do we put our socks on so we don't get blisters on our feet when we play basketball. And the rim will fit two balls through it at one time. It's not this little thing that we're shooting at. So it's opening up the rim. It's, how do these executives put their socks on? And it's getting them to open up and say, okay, let's get back to the fundamentals. What are those things that made you successful? What are those things you're doing? And now let's say, okay, what are those things that are holding you back?
Mm,
And really getting them to really talk about those things. And I've been lucky enough to have people open up when I talk to them. And I don't know what it is, but maybe it's my demeanor. I don't, I'm an excitable person. I get excited about talking about coaching. So I take that and I get excited about it with coaching, but I temper it a little bit when I'm trying to go deep into working with people.
nice. And how would you see sort of simplicity? So when you ask sort of more fundamental questions, really trying to get into their psyche, maybe like what you mentioned, kind of reading between the lines. Um, how do you do it where they feel like, oh, that's not a, I mean, as a leader said to you, Jeff, that's an intrusive question. Like, why would you ask that? Because sometimes the front is so big, right? And the sort of the demeanor is larger than life. These are charismatic. I think of, all of these people, like, how do you get past the, the initial sort of like, um, what Brene Brown would call the armor. How do you get past
Mhm.
that? How do you see that in your coaching where you get past the armor?
It goes back to the first coaching session, sitting down with them and going through a checklist of things like, how do you want to be coached? What is it that you want from me as your coach to do? And they'll tell me exactly, well, I need to be pushed. You need to really push me because sometimes I get stubborn. Um, how do you learn best? That's another question I like to ask. And they tell me, well, verbally, I like to read, I like to do things. So it's knowing those things ahead of time and then prefacing it when it's all through, saying, okay, now, are you willing to have me push you? Are you willing to have me push you to step out of your comfort zone to try things that you've never tried before, to get you where you want to be, but you haven't tried those before? So do all those things at the beginning. So we lay the groundwork, and then we get into the coaching. Excuse me. Then I'm able to ask those questions
Mm,
because they know it's coming, and I hold them accountable. And I don't care whether you're the CEO of a 100,000 employee company or whether you're, an executive at at a little bit lower level. It's the same thing. We're holding you accountable for your actions.
Mm.
So if we do something and we say we're going to do something, you better do it. Otherwise, on our next call or next time we meet, we're going to talk about it and say, why didn't you do it? What was holding you back? And really holding people accountable. And when you hold them accountable, you can say just about anything to them. At least I found that. And the higher the level of the executive, the more they want to be held accountable, is what I've seen.
Yep. That's 100%, Jeff. We had a gentleman by the name of Ed Piccolino, and he had said the same thing. The higher they go in the organization, the more they need someone like an executive coach to ask them those questions, because none of the rest of the people that are in their sphere will. There are many people around their sphere. I won't sort of say none. Many people around them won't, because of their own career aspirations or their concerns for their own future.
I had a situation like that happen a number of years ago. I was coaching a CEO who you read about. He's in the news all the time. The board brought me in to coach this CEO, and they said his skill set, his technical skill set is great. His soft skills fall 1 on the scale of 1 to 10. He said, unless he changes his soft skills, we're not going to be able to keep him in this position much longer because he alienates people. So I went in there, we did a 360. I did it both verbally and, online. And after we got the 360 back, I looked at it and said, it was the worst 360 I've seen in 20 years. The comments were just off the chart. And I sat down with him and started going over it. And I'm sitting on one side of the table and he's sitting on the other side of the table, and he's wearing a tie and I'm wearing a tie. And we start talking. And I said, before we do the 360 and I share it with you, I just want you to look it over for a moment. And while he's sitting there, he's all of a sudden, as he's reading it, he's turning red. And like his tie is getting tight, his collar is getting tight on here. And I think, he's going to jump across the table and hit me or do something like that. And all of a sudden he raises his hand, he pounds the table and he said, never in my wildest years did I ever think that people thought that about me. Nobody has ever said that to me. And that's, again, goes to what you were saying. When you get to that level, people don't tell you that you're not doing a very good job, or that this isn't working or that's not working. And we as coaches, we take that information and now give them that information to help them overcome those challenges. Because if they don't know, how are they going to get better? And I look at it like you probably do. Feedback's a gift. And the more feedback you can get, the better you're going to get and the better you're going to be.
There's something to, sort of pushing on this idea around the person that says they're self-aware, but we may be blind to our own blindness, right. And thinking about whether that's the Johari window or however you see it, whatever your worldview is, we are blind to our own blindness and we just can't see it without other people reflecting back, even if we're staring in the mirror. Yeah. Jeff, what would you want from a coach?
I think, and I go back to my days when I was running companies as a CEO, I probably want somebody who's going to be honest, who's not going to pull any punches with me, that's going to tell it the way it is, somebody that has sat in the same seat that I've sat in and know the pressures that go along with being a CEO at a company, have the ability to communicate with me in a way that I understand. Because when we communicate, sometimes it's one-way communication. We think we're communicating with the other person, but the person that's receiving the information isn't getting it. So communicate it in a way that I understand it, I can rationalize it, and I can say, that makes sense. I think I'll try it. And then hold me accountable for the change that I want to make.
And how about a few resources? What would you recommend as far as, and even Wooden books, podcasts? What do you like to give?
I think John Wooden books are great. I like Harvard Business Review. I read them diligently every month when they come out. I'm subscribed to all their newsletters and everything. And kind of go back a long time to the Leadership Challenge.
Mm,
That's a book that was a great book that has stood the test of time. And I
yeah.
think that that's a great book for any leader to read, for any coach to read. So I would say those were some of the things that I read, and that I'm always online looking at things. I probably spend at least 2 hours a day reading, so that I can stay current with what's happening in the business world today.
Mm, yeah. Thanks. Dave, what's your reflection? You know Jeff well, so what did you hear?
First of all, I did not know you were a basketball coach. How is that possible after all these years? I so appreciate it, and I could picture you doing it. And the Wooden connection makes so much sense. I so appreciate Jeff, and over the years, he has worked on some of the more challenging clients that I've thrown at him, and I've always been impressed. And one of the things that I reflect on now in our conversation is the ability to keep it simple, right? If you're listening to a lot of complexity, but keeping it simple and reflecting it back, and then holding leaders accountable at as you move up and you're working with the most senior people. It's what they want, and I think helping them with that gives you permission and opportunity to work on some of the deeper areas,
Hmm.
which often come up.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I, I I think my reflection is around the first meeting. Uh, there may be setting the stage for the future conversations that sort of what you're leading with, or how that original conversation goes, gives me permission to say things or comment. And maybe I don't realize, like, oh, just think we're getting to know one another. But what I may be doing is setting the stage to be able to probe far deeper, earlier, faster as a coach, because I've set it up like, hey, you tell me what you want. Now I'm just going to reflect back what you said you wanted from a coach. If you want me to be direct, and that's what you've asked for, that's what you want, then I'm going to, in sort of holding this space for the two of us, I'm going to be direct. Um, and if it's not, then let me know. But at least I'm going to attempt to do what you asked
yeah,
as your coach, because you probably aren't hearing it. If you're asking for directness, the chances are in the organization you recognize that they are not being direct with you, or they may be intimidated by your shadow, or your whatever. Your presence is causing people not to share with you those things, like in that 360 that you got. So
I'm working with an executive right now. He happens to be a CEO, and he likes to walk around the office, managed by walking around, which is great. And sometimes people are afraid to approach him. And I said to him, it's not you, it's your title. So you have to make an effort to reach out to them. Even though you want them to reach out to you, they're going to be afraid because of your title. And he took that to heart and he started doing it. And he's had some great conversations. He's turned the culture around at the organization.
mm,
And it's a pleasure to work with him
mm,
and see that change happening.
Yeah, I so appreciate that, like accessibility, entry, how leaders connect, right? And how it's different for each leader. And being able to find what those things are, like your way of connecting, but also knowing that you're carrying a heavy title with you. My favorite was the CEO that liked to throw the football around in the office. It was a Wall Street firm. I like that, but it was difficult for them to find the way that they could connect, because they couldn't do it without some kind of activity.
Mm-hmm.
mm, yeah. And what happens if I'm not good at throwing the football?
You know what? It wasn't at the time. It was not inclusive. I have to say it wasn't. But
Yeah.
but you know what? It was playful,
Uh,
and I think that's the idea that you like, what do you talk to the CEO about,
mm,
right? And then how do you help a CEO enter into a conversation that people feel comfortable with? I had the other side too, where I had CEOs that people just immediately got scared and put their
mm,
head down.
mm,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
That football breaks down the barriers, doesn't it?
Hmm. Yeah. Jeff, what's the best way if someone wants to get a hold of you? What's the best way for someone to find you?
There are two ways. They can go to our website, which is real simple, Wolf, WOLF, like the animal, wolfmotivation.com, or Jeff, JEFF, at wolfmotivation.com.
Mm, great.
Again, simplicity.
Yeah. Nice. Thanks. Dave?
I love the simplicity. I'm going to simply give our final shout out to our sponsor. Are you feeling stuck or overwhelmed? Character Matters Coaching and Consulting provides leadership coaching and consulting to empower you to overcome obstacles and reach your full potential. Visit charactermatters.com to learn more about their transformative coaching and how you can get connected to Matt for your organization. I want to close by saying, Jeff, I so appreciate you coming on the podcast. I so appreciate the number of years that we've had a chance to work together and the things that I've had an opportunity to learn from you. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure being on here and sharing, the few little things that I know about coaching with you guys, and appreciate it. And Matt, it was nice to meet you as well.
Nice having you on, Jeff. All right. Until next time. Thanks for listening. If you love this podcast, please share it with another coach or leader. Make sure you go to the show notes to get all the resources from today's episode.